Ear piercing, anatomy, and placement. Kind of giving you an idea where these things go. Coming up next on New to Piercing, episode number 5. For those who are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Hope you're finding it helpful, useful, etc. But you may not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. Today's topic comes from a suggestion from one of our viewers by the name of Romeo's Lover. At least it was one word, and I'm all together, but I'm guessing that's the 2 words that come out of it. They asked if we could put up diagrams or charts or something to kind of show anatomy versus where the piercing should be. So I came up with the idea of purchasing one of these. So we're going to try this out and see if this is helpful, and also I'll put some example photos up too. We're going to go through each of the ear piercings, but this is part 1, so we're just going to cover the top part of the ear, and then we'll do the bottom of the ear next. So look for that in the future. Now let's start on the upper ear, and the first one is going to be the vertical helix. The helix is this ridge right here that goes around. It basically goes around the ear at the top. It's more pronounced up here. These are done vertically through this this area, usually to the angle that it's done at. So if you kind of think of it like a clock, you can do various different angles and etc. So what we look for anatomy is whether or not it is pronounced enough and wide enough that it's going to easily support the jewelry and avoid tearing or the piercing being rejected. If it isn't, it cannot be a good idea to do this. So that's one of the things you want to look for. If it's well pronounced, usually they can be done. The next one is is an extremely rare piercing, and it's called a cat flap piercing. This requires that you have a certain kind of anatomy, and the easiest way to explain that would be this area at the top of your ear is folded over kind of like that. And what it's done is it's done this way through that flap, so it appears like it's just kind of floating there, just like a dot in the center of that, or a really nice gym setting. With that, you really do have to have that fold over. If you don't have it, it's just a vertical helix, basically. Kind of. Sort of, but it's not. It's a different placement. I have done quite a few of these over the years. I've also done it underneath, which is like a hidden helix, which we'll get to a little bit later. For people that work jobs that maybe it wasn't acceptable to have that. But yeah, it's really not, I'd say 1 out of 1,000 people have that fold. Now I'm going to talk about one of the most difficult and traumatic piercings to get done on the ear, and that's the industrial. By definition, an industrial is any 2 piercings connected by a straight barbell. The most common one is the one that's done helix to helix like so. Usually what we look for anatomy-wise is whether or not this area is going to be wide enough and deep enough that it'll support the jewelry on this side and on the other side. The other thing we have to take into account is this area of the ear. We want it as flat as possible. If it isn't, or there's a raised area, like you see this raised area right here, or if the ear is folded like mine is, where it's more like this, it's not going to work, mainly because what's going to happen is that barbell is either going to be forced outward or it's going to cause the ear to be in this unnatural position, which will lead to rejection and migration and all kinds of fun problems. Not so fun problems, I should say. Or it's going to start digging a hole into this area of the upper ear, which is going to be very uncomfortable and look really gross. So, one thing I always tell people, if it's your first piercing, the last thing you need to do is get an industrial piercing. If it's your first, you need some time to kind of get used to healing piercings in this area of the body and get an idea of how well your body heals and kind of get some experience behind it. It's not a good first piercing. Now, industrials can be done in other areas, like, for example, they can be done conch to conch, vertically. They can be done, I've seen them done trachea to conch, antitrachea to helix. It really depends on the shape of your ear and the skill of your piercer. And it may involve them bending or adjusting the jewelry so that it fits that area. And it can be, the more out there you get with the combinations, the more prone it is to problems. Now let's talk about the industrial's bratty little brother, the floating industrial. Now the floating industrial traditionally or most commonly is done through this helix and then, or through this outer helix on the front, and then it stops kind of about like that. And the piercing that's on this side is done this way. So you have a piercing that's this way and one that's this way. These are done usually on ears that are just maybe not the best candidate for a traditional helix to helix industrial, and the person really wants them. They can be a little tricky to heal out. They're not quite as difficult as a helix to helix, but they're up there. It really requires a bit of additional skill and knowledge, mainly because the jewelry has to fit perfectly, and the angle of the piercings has to be pretty much right in alignment. It can be a long heel. Once again, not a piercing I would suggest if it's your first piercing. The hidden or floating helix. Now, this is the helix. As I mentioned earlier, the floating or hidden is done in a way that where the piercing is at, it's kind of hidden by this helix overlap, or it's done vertically and with a disc on the top that's not very visible. The idea is that you can't see where the piercing's at, and all you see is a dangling charm or pendant or a chain. So it just looks like it's just kind of floating up there magically, like the land of illusion. Is there anybody old enough on this channel to remember that guy? With these, they can be a little bit, the outcome could be a little bit mixed. It really depends on how pronounced this area is right here. If it's bent, if it's more pronounced, this kind of ridge up here, how well that chain is going to hang. Also, I swear most people take pictures of them when they're just slightly turned that way, so it looks like the chain hangs freely. As far as healing, they're pretty easy to heal, about the same as what you would have with either helix piercing or a vertical helix piercing. Now let's talk about the piercing that kind of kicked off the whole ear piercings being cool thing, and that is the Fod Helix. Once again, this is the helix of the ear. It kind of starts right here, down in the center of the ear, and goes all the way around and stops about there. Helix, well, of course it would go all the way around. But anyway, what we're talking about is this area right here. Now, helix or Fod Helix piercings are done straight through like this. They're done with a usually a flat back labrae stud and then a gem on the front. What we look for with this is how pronounced or thick this area is that's loose from the ear. If it's really, really shallow, like it isn't really pronounced, or it's very small, we'll usually advise not getting it done. And the reason being is that it's more prone to getting caught on things and tearing out or rejecting out of the body this way. The other thing you need to take into account is this helix is not perfectly flat. If you take your ear and you kind of start right down here and go upward, you'll notice it kind of curves outward. So the further you go up, the thinner the tissue is. Another thing to consider as far as placement is whether or not anything that's behind it is going to get in the way and cause that jewelry to be more stuck out or stick out more. Lots of things to consider, but most people have the anatomy to do at least one or two of them. Now the Rook piercing. Rook piercing is done. Grab my trusty Sharpie marker here. Right in this area right here at the top of the ear. I'm making sure I'm hitting the same spot. There's a ridge right here. Kind of follows. It's kind of like the second helix of the ear. This kind of ridge that goes along here. And what we do is we generally do this just outside of where the Fod Helix flap stops. It's done this way with a curved barbell. You can wear rings in it after it's fully seasoned and healed. What we look for anatomy-wise is we want something that's very peaked. if possible, in almost like a shelf kind of laying over. What we want to avoid is ones that are not very pronounced or are very shallow or more like a hill and kind of flat. Those are going to be more prone to rejection or migration. Usually most people have the anatomy for a rook. It's rare that I'll turn somebody away because I don't think it's going to heal. But some people actually have enough room up there to do 2 or 3 of them in some cases. Now, you're disappointed because your rook, that ridge isn't sharp enough. It isn't peaked enough for it to get done. What can you do because you want something fancy there? What you do is called a Fod Helix. Fod Helix is done right here. It's just one pier. It goes through into the back of the ear, usually as a stud. We'll try to do it at a slight angle, so that it looks like it's the top of a faux rook. With those, you just want to make sure there's clearance in the back for the placement that you want. Usually, with these can affect things like if you wear corrective lenses or if you wear sunglasses a lot. Glasses. Basically, you need to kind of take that into account before getting this one done. But for the most part, most people can get it done. Not really a very rare piercing or something that requires the perfect anatomy for. Now let's move on to the Shinman piercing, which I always feel like I'm mispronouncing. It is a little further into the ear, kind of in this area right about here. There's a lot of things being said about this piercing over the years because it's supposedly a pressure point. Now, I'm not an acupuncturist, and I can guarantee you that a majority of the piercers that work in the United States and the rest of the world are not acupuncturists or experts in that field. Whether or not we hit that spot is pretty 50-50. How much it stimulates that, how long it stimulates that, So don't believe the hype is what I'm getting at. If you feel like it's going to work and it's going to make you quit smoking because it's another motivator, go for it. Otherwise, you have kind of a unique and cool piercing. It's done a little bit further out than traditionally further out of this, or no, this way from the faux rook. Now let's talk about the flat piercing. Flat piercing is piercings done in this area right here. They can be done here, is generally probably the most traditional. What we generally try to do, it gives you a lot of room for creativity and imagination, depending on what different types of jewelry are available, fronts, etc., and the shape of your ear. Sometimes when we have this ridge right here, we generally try to kind of do one at the peak and then move down it. You can do patterns. You can follow the flow of the ear. You can put large pieces in that have a curvature to them, so they kind of look like that. You can even do it over here. Lots of things to work with. Anatomy-wise, you need to work with the anatomy. So if it's perfectly flat, you have a lot more room for placement and creativity as far as patterns. If it's more like this one where you have kind of a ridge up here, you're a little bit more limited, but you can use that to your advantage and work within the flow and the anatomy that's available. So pretty much everybody can get these done. They can be a little tricky to heal sometimes, and the biggest thing I will tell you is downsize on a timely basis. And the last one, probably the most common upper ear cartilage piercing there is, and that is the Helix piercing. I know I've confused you by calling this the Helix because that's its technical medical anatomy name. But for some reason or another, what we used to call upper ear cartilage piercings have become Helix piercings. Helix piercings are done usually kind of up in this area. They kind of follow the helix, but they're done this way. They are not done like this. That is a vertical Helix piercing. They are done like a flat, straight through. Now, anatomy-wise, the only things we're concerned about would be, in some cases, if this flap is kind of more curved inward, it can cover up the jewelry. We also, there's kind of these tight spots down in here where maybe there's not room for the jewelry. The other thing we would be concerned about is if you do want to wear a ring in it eventually, which I don't advise doing for the first 6 months to a year, usually first year, whether or not you're going to find a ring that's going to wrap around the helix at that placement. Everybody's different up in this area a great deal. So it's one of those things where you kind of want to discuss what your long-term plans are with your piercer and get it done. That said, pretty much everybody can get a Helix piercing. It's pretty common. Also, it's a good choice for that first piercing. Maybe you have your lobes done, but you want to kind of move into piercing and do some different things in your ear. It's a good first or second piercing to get done because they tend to have a good tradition of healing. If you take care of them properly, they'll heal without issue. Flat would be another one that I would suggest. Now, do you have any of these piercings? What was your experience like? What's your anatomy like? Did I answer all the questions you needed answered? If you're new to this, feel free to make a comment. I try to answer comments when I have time. But until next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in that next video.